To start, can I just say how clever Disney Infinity is as a business concept for a media empire? Disney has always had problems with interactive media, and video games in particular. When they licensed their IPs out to, say, Capcom in the 90s, the results were charming, but Disney's proprietary efforts have tended to struggle a bit. But beyond that, they never know what IPs are going to be huge hits and which ones are going to flop. They can't make a multi-million-dollar game for every big movie, but they don't want to be caught without a game to sell when the next mega hit comes along. So, for example, in 2013, they were likely thinking they're lucky stars they didn't try to make a standalone Lone Ranger game, but were probably kicking themselves that they didn't have a proper Frozen game to sell. But with Disney Infinity, they get to sort of bundle that risk. New IPs can have a small playset released, and if it flops, the loss is comparatively minimal, and if it's a hit, you have something to synergistically capitalize on. The question about whether they want to make a full-time game out of a property is no longer a concern. Just plan to put your upcoming properties in the next wave of Disney Infinity. So of course the latest version was going to focus on Star Wars, a property that they have been pushing non-stop all year, really. And since I've done episodes on Disney Infinity and Disney Infinity 2.0, some people have expressed interest in hearing what I think about Disney Infinity 3.0, or the Star Wars one. And since the docket's pretty full this time of year, I figured this was a good opportunity for a short, loosely edited little video just to fill people in. The area that's received the most attention has been the core play mechanics, and it benefits playing the game tremendously. They've refined the driving physics and made the racetracks wider. This doesn't exactly turn Disney Infinity into Mario Kart, but now the racing can be a cute diversion rather than an immediate and perpetual frustration. The block-based world building still means that you hit a dead stop far too often, but the game's quicker about teleporting you back to the track when that happens. It's not ideal, but it's strong enough now that they've released a Speedway Toy Box expansion that's a good way to level up non-playset characters if you don't prefer combat. And frankly, it puts the Cars playset from a few years back to shame with how good it feels. And speaking of feeling good, yes, Ninja Theory lent a hand to developing combat for the game, and it is a big improvement. There are now juggles, input-delayed combos, and dash moves to give the combat a teeny bit of depth. But what really sells it are the new enemy designs. Previous Infinity games just had enemies with more and more health while dishing out more and more damage. Now you actually have to use different strategies to take on different bad guys. Some are trash mobs, some require you to break a shield before you can hurt them, some require you to dodge their attack before they're vulnerable, and others require you to block a powerful hit. As always, it's a kid's game, and this isn't going to be Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, and frankly, it's not trying to be. It's not a deep, elegant combat system. But taken with the die and you have to replace the character that's on the stand stuff from 2.0, and it's finally one that's engaging enough to simply be fun to interact with. The first game was spamming the melee button, the second game was spamming the melee button and occasionally using your super to recover some health, and here we finally have some nuance and timing and the requirement that you use other abilities. I also like some of the subtle character touches. Obi-Wan and Yoda's force power is a push that knocks enemies away, while Anakin's is a force pull to get them in close so he can do damage. And Luke's is also a force pull, tying him to his father and his father's aggression. It's just a subtle mechanical flourish, but I dig the way they're doing some character development with the mechanics. Same thing with Sadness's heavy attack, a full-on faceplant. The attention to detail on how these characters have been translated into a third-person action game is apparent and much appreciated. So the game's legitimately fun to play now, more so than it's ever been. But here's the thing, the promise of Disney Infinity was never just the playsets. It was the opportunity to build your own levels and worlds, to never run out of things to do because beyond the 3-hour playset there was an unlimited number of levels for your little toys to conquer. And the tools to build those extra levels are still just so bad. 2 years in, and it remains a process of tediously placing things block by block and searching for the appropriately sized, sloped, or themed item from an impossible-to-navigate menu. Just setting up a space to beat up some bad guys is needlessly difficult, and this is supposed to be for kids. I've used actual level-building software that is friendlier to use than this, and instead of trying to fix it, they've doubled down on outsourcing the effort to AI-based builders that do the construction for you. So you can plop down a city builder to build you a city, or a treehouse builder to make you a treehouse, or a terrain builder to build out your terrain. And I wouldn't mind that terribly, I guess. It could result in some kid-pick-style messy creations where you and an algorithm are working together to make a thing. You know, the AI builds the city and you fill in the details and the gameplay. Except those steps are also done through this same awkward interface. Decorating in particular feels unfulfilling. You still can't scale anything. Coloring is unnecessarily difficult and error-prone, given that it's a gun that changes the selected color every few seconds, and theming only works on terrain pieces. And since the decorative bits come from different playsets, your creations are super garish. You can't really take the algorithm-generated spaces and make them pretty or give them a subtle mood. You just plop down prefab items and throw in a Nightmare Before Christmas sky to make it spooky, or a Mickey Mouse sky to make it whimsical. And when it comes to designing your level's gameplay, I love how many prefab games they give you the power to toy with, but it's still just as difficult to set up the game logic as it is to build terrain. If these building woes sound like last year's iteration, you'd be right. Aside from a few new creativa toys, none of the core issues with the creation tools have even really been looked at. If you're patient and have a ton of time to burn, you might be able to make an ugly, buggy, badly themed version of what you envision. But as a kid-friendly world-building tool, it remains cumbersome, and as a player, the results remain underwhelming. The current tools don't really help inspire creativity, and they don't work at generating things you'd actually want to play, either. Look, if you're a Star Wars fan who wants to own everything to do with the franchise, it might be worth taking a peek. Or if you've always had a passing interest in Disney Infinity, there's never been a better time to give it a shot. But for someone who has watched this game arrive with tremendous unfulfilled promise, and continue to barely iterate on that promise, I'm quickly losing enthusiasm. The building system needs to be completely revamped and either made less powerful and more accessible so kids can use it, or simply made powerful enough to make overcoming the interface worth it for both players and creators. In the meantime, it's a $60 game that comes with 3 hours of play and additional 3-hour expansions that cost $34 each. An infinite series of adventures with beloved characters can help justify that price tag, but right now it's mostly just an infinite series of ugly floating islands with the occasional guy to punch. And that sucks, because I really want a cross-franchise game builder that's kid-friendly, and I had hoped the progress I saw in 2.0 was just the beginning of some real improvements. Maybe it's the fact that Mario Maker has shown how good a focused game creation tool can be, but Disney Infinity feels further from that with each iteration that doubles down on the playsets but neglects the creative tools. Regardless, there's only so many times I can say that there's always next year. I think I've always rated these games more highly for the promise than for the product, and that realization has been kind of a bummer.
Punch it!